Friday, guys, and you know what that means. The MMA Junkie Twitter mailbag's back October 8th on the eve of UFC Fight Night, Dern versus Rodriguez, which takes place tomorrow night in Las Vegas. We'll have Ken Hathaway and John Morgan there, but I know people aren't necessarily excited about this card as much as the past few weeks, but fights are fights. We have some storylines to discuss. You guys still had questions, which if you guys have questions for next week, I'm just going to take a step ahead and say, put them in the comments below. But let me answer the questions that you guys did send in already. First one from Super Saiyan MMA. Why or why not should Henry Cejudo cut the title line? Super Saiyan actually has a second question too, which I'll get to in a second. But to answer that first question, if you guys watched the Dana White's Contender Series post-fight press conference with Dana White on Tuesday, you would have heard him talk about Henry Cejudo, and he kind of discussed how Henry's been hinting at in some interviews with ESPN and some other outlets that he wants to come back. And this has been something that he's been saying for a while. We talked about it a little bit last week on the mailbag. And Dana White kind of said, good luck with that. If you think you're going to come in here and step over Max Holloway and go fight Alexander Volkanovski. So should he or should he not? I don't know, right? Because the UFC's set the groundwork to this. For Dana White to sit up there and say, hey, you know, he's going to cut these guys. What does he think he's doing? I mean, we've seen them do this time and time again. Like, if this was a totally merit-based system, I would agree with Dana and say, hey, that's not fair. You know, you're sitting on the shelf and all these other guys are fighting and you get to overstep them. But that's not the way that the UFC's operated in the past. I mean, look at some of the title shots that have occurred. We saw Dan Henderson, fight Michael Bisping. We've seen Conor get title shots, left and right. We've seen all sorts of weirdness like that. Where GSP came back after all those years and fought Michael Bisping in a different weight class for the belt. So things aren't necessarily always based on a meritocracy type standing. So I don't really agree with Dana on that point. If we were going on a merit-based standpoint, I think he would have a point. But I think right now the way that things should work out is Volkanovski fight the winner of Holloway versus Rodriguez. And then, honestly, if Henry comes in there and there hasn't been somebody to surface, I don't really have a problem with it. I think that's a great fight and it would be one that the fans would be interested in, seeing Henry go for that third title. Second question from Super Saiyan. Can Funkmaster Aljamain Sterling really be ready to go in December like he claims? If so, wouldn't that be a quick turnaround for Jan or Sandhagen, benefiting Aljo only? I've said this not necessarily on this program, but others before. I think people need to lay off Aljamain Sterling a little bit. He was put in a very tough position. He was pressured to take a fight. He didn't sign this fight wasn't signed until a few weeks ago, or a few weeks prior to the withdrawal, removal, whatever you want to call him, not being in that title fight. And he was kind of pressured to turn around as quick as he could, even though he had neck surgery. So I honestly think this is a result of that. And everybody that pressured him, and honestly, he was the one that ultimately said yes to it. Everybody's responsible for this. But at the same time, do I think it's, could it benefit Aljo to not have to do a quick turnaround? Sure. Maybe. It depends. I mean, sometimes these guys like being active. Maybe Peter Yan goes out there and starches Corey Sandhagen and he's ready to go for the next one. So I don't necessarily think you can look at it in black and white. Could it benefit Aljamain Sterling? Absolutely. Will it 100%? I don't think that that's a fair play either. But we'll have to see what happens. As far as will he be ready for that date, I think it's kind of unpredictable right now. I do believe he's injured. I do believe there's maybe something else that he has to do for his neck. So we'll see. I don't think that the UFC will schedule it. I think that they want that fight on a pay-per-view, and right now the rest of the year is kind of filled up. So I think we're looking at January, maybe UFC 270 at the earliest, February UFC 271, something like that. Next question from Andrew Reed. Why does a fighter get rewarded with a main event fight after missing weight for a previous fight that was canceled because of it? If you're talking about Aspen Ladd, which I'm assuming that is what you are talking about, Holly Holm being out of the fight next week against Norma Dumont, Aspen Ladd stepping in, if you guys missed that news. So why does she get that shot? And I think two things. One, she's available. She's stepped up. She's saving the opportunity for the UFC. If the UFC didn't have her to step in, I think they would be in trouble. They would either have to scramble to find someone else that is even less worthy, or they would have to, go to a whole new main event or bump something up. And if you look at that card, I don't think you can necessarily afford to have something be bumped up. So to me, I think Aspen Ladd stepping up to women's featherweight, that's a big part of the storyline of this fight. That needs divisions. And in a way, I think Holly Holm versus Norma Dumont was not going to be a competitive fight at all. This one, you could argue, would be closer. I think that it's not going to be a blowout one way or another. I think Ladd should win, but who knows? She's moving up in weight, and it should be interesting to see how she does there. So I'm interested in it to a certain degree. I think that it's probably was the best option for the UFC, and that's why she was able to kind of the UFC could just kind of forget about the past, right? Last question about this weekend's card, UFC Fight Night, Rodriguez versus Dern. With many exciting prospects such as Alexander Romanov, Chris Gutierrez, and Phil Hawes on the card, which one do you believe will be the most impressive? I think, to me, Alexander Romanov. I'd love to see him. I know he's fighting Jared Vanderaa. That's kind of a lopsided fight in his favor. But I think he's going to be a real contender. I'm excited to see what he brings to the division in the years to come. He's fun. He's fun to watch. He's kind of a unique-looking guy in terms of, just that the skill set that he brings to the cage. He brings a high output. He's got some grappling. So I think that that's the guy to watch going forward. But those other names you named are very worthy as well. With that should do it for this week. I appreciate everyone sending in questions, like I said at the beginning of this video. Put them in the comments if you have any for next week. And tune into our coverage tomorrow for UFC Fight Night. Ken Hathaway, John Morgan out in Vegas. We got you covered. And enjoy the fights, guys. Appreciate it.